Hello, this video is a review of prime factorization and GCF, which is greatest common factor. We are reviewing this because it will help us with our next unit, which is called factoring. Factoring is breaking down a polynomial or breaking it apart to figure out the original pieces or factors. And we'll get more into this tomorrow in class on Wednesday. So let's do a quick review. Prime factorization means we are figuring out which prime numbers multiply together to make the original number. So a lot of you guys, if you think back, we used to make prime factorization trees was the strategy to help organize our numbers when we would work with these type of problems. So I'm going to set mine up similarly. If you don't like to use a factor tree, you don't have to, it's just one option. So for 18, what we want to do is just think of two numbers that multiply together to give us 18. So for example, we could use 6 and 3. So now 3 is a prime number. So that part of my tree can't go any further, but 6 can be broken down into 2 and 3. And remember, I'm trying to figure out what prime numbers multiply together. We don't count 1, so 2 can't get any smaller, and 3 can't get any smaller. So those are my 3 prime numbers that are circled that multiply together to give us 18. When we rewrite that, we usually start with the smallest number first. So I would write 2. Let's erase that quick, didn't show up right. So we would have our 2 times 3 times 3. And then we want to simplify that. So we have 2, and then since we have two threes multiplying, we can write that as 2 times 3 squared. And that would be our final answer there. For our number 120, again, start wherever you want to. So for that one, I did 10 and 12. Make that a little darker, hold tight. And then from there, for 10, we can do 2 times 5. And 12, I picked 3 and 4. So far, 2 is prime, 5 is prime, because I can't break those down any further. Remember, we don't break it down to where we have like 1 times something, so we stop here. 3 is, but 4, I could do 2 and 2. So when I write my final answer here, I have 3 2's multiplying, so that's 2 cubed, times I have 1 3 and 1 5. So 2 cubed times 3 times 5 is how I break 120 down into its prime factorization. Okay, one other thing we need to review is how to find our greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is the biggest number that can divide into 2 or more numbers. So it's the biggest thing that can divide into 2 or more numbers. So when I look at 8 and 20, for example, what I'm asking is, what's the biggest number that can go into 8 and 20? So a couple ways you guys can set this up. I can look at, for example, what I can multiply into 8, which would be I could multiply 1 into 8. I could do, for example, 1 times 8, or I could do 2 times 4. So 1, 8, 2, and 4 are all factors of 8. They can all divide into it. 20, to get 20, 1 divides into 20, 2 works, 3 does not, 4 and 5 work, 10 would come next, and then 20. So the greatest common factor would be the biggest number that goes into both of those things. So in this case, that would be 4. So the GCF of those two is 4. Same thing applies when we look at 9 and 36. So for 9, I have 1, 3, since 3 times 3 gives me 9, and then 9. For 36, I have more. I have 1 works. So really you're thinking about what numbers divide evenly into 36. So 1 does, 2 does, 3, 4, 5 does not, 6 does, 7 and 8 don't, so we're kind of just walking through this process. 10 wouldn't, 11 wouldn't, 12 does, Keep going, 18 would be our next one, and then 36. And you can use a calculator to help with these if you want. So in this case, biggest thing that is shared by both would be that 9. So my GCF of 9 and 36 is 9. This also works for polynomials. The setup's going to be very similar. We're just going to add on a little bit more of that expansion where we look at the factors before we figure out the GCF. So if I start with, let's look at 14. Oh, not quite as dark as we want. Hold up here. (14xy). Okay, let's just focus on the 14 first. For some reason it's showing up as two different colors on there, which is weird, but we'll roll with it. So for 14, I can use 1 works, 2 goes into 14, 7, and 14. So those are the numbers that work. And then for that x, I just have 1x and 1y. So I'm going to write those out as well. For 21x cubed, my numbers that work for 21 are 1, 3, 7, and 21. And then I want to expand out the x cubed. So x cubed means I have 3 x's multiplying, and I'll show you why that's helpful in a second. So let's look for the biggest number first. That will be our 7. And then I want to look at how many variables they share. So it has to be something they both have. So in this case, I can take 1x, just 1, because the 14xy only has 1 to give from each of them. So my GCF would be 7x. Let's try our second example. All right, so we have 5a squared b. So for 5, I can only multiply 1 and 5. A squared means I have 2 a's and I have 1 b. Then I have 9a cubed b to the 4th. 9, I can do 1, 3, and 9. And then a cubed means I have 3 a's and I have b to the 4th, so 4 b's. And then next, I am going to look for numbers that they both share, which in this case is just the 1. I can take 2 a's from each, and I can take 1 b. So when I rewrite that, I can share 1. They share 2 a's, so they each have 2 a's to give. So a squared, because they each have 2, and they each have 1 b. GCF would be 1a squared b. For these next few examples, my suggestion is try them on your own, pause this video, and then come back and see if you got it correct. So I'll start with the first one. Go ahead and pause it if you want to. We have 8xy to the 4th z squared. So start with 8. 8 I can multiply, or the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. And then I have 1x, 4 y's, and 2 z's. And then I have 32xz squared. For 32, I can do 1, 4, 8, and 32. I have 1x and 2 z's. And then I'm going to find what is the biggest thing they share. So they share 8 is the biggest number. I can take 1x, and I can take 2 z's. So GCF would be 8x z squared. For our next one, we have 12x. For 12x, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And then my 1x, 22y, can do 1, 2, 11, 22, and 1y. Biggest thing they share here, they share a 1. Oop, my bad, that's incorrect. They share a 2 is the biggest number. And then they don't share any variables because one has an x and one has a y, so those are different. So the GCF of 12x and 22y is 2. That's the biggest factor they both have. And we've got one more. There is a typo here. This should be a positive 2ab to the 4th, not a negative. I apologize. So we're looking at 2ab to the 4th and 3a squared b squared Trying to erase that part, doesn't seem to want to. So c squared. So for this one we have 1 and 2. We have an a, and then we have b to the 4th, so 4 b's. For this one I have 1 and 3, and then it's a squared, so 2 a's, b squared, and c squared. So altogether, biggest number would be 1. You can take 1 a from each, and then 2 b's, and then they don't share any c's. So my GCF, the greatest common factor, so the things they both share would be a 1, an a, and 2 b's for a b squared. When you are all done with this video, please save these notes for class tomorrow, and then go ahead and work on the practice worksheet. I will be checking that off and going through it in class tomorrow. If you finish early, please look over the IXL review for the semester 1 final and look through the topics and work on those that you maybe think you need the most review on at this point. Thank you.